Russia. It's cold, gross, everyone smells like they hate themselves, and it's got a former KGBTQ+ guy running things. It's the perfect place to spend 100 days mucking around trying to figure out where I'm going and what I'm doing with my life. Last year, I did a Cryogenic winter playthrough that you all seem to love, and I've been getting a ton of requests to do it again. Instead of copying that same approach, I figured why not take the journey to Russia, where it's generally just as shitty. With over 2,000 5-star ratings, Alt's Project Russia mod adds a ton of cities from different mod authors all into one playable 3,600 cell map, making it the largest map mod I've ever played. Now it's still a work in progress and it's being updated all the time. There's a ton of cities still being worked on, and Alt was generous enough to give me a map of locations that I can visit and show off. To stay true to and continue to make life miserable for myself, I've added Cryogenic Winter to the playthrough, mainly because when I think Russia, I think cold and snow. To make this manageable, I'm keeping it on the normal difficulty, but adding the permanent snow option, because I've never played this map before and have no idea how loot tables are set up or where I'd even go to find warm clothing. Personally, I think that's a fair trade-off. Alright, I've been talking way too long now, so here's my build. The mod list is down in the description. I set hell events to sometimes and the zombie population to high, and with that, here's how I spent my first 100 days in Russia, Cryogenic Winter version. I spawned into Russia at 5 AM on December 1st, and immediately began looting the nearby houses. Just outside of my spawn home, I harvested a few crops and began stockpiling some canned food and a chef knife. After looting a couple houses, I stepped outside and began luring nearby zombies over a fence. This worked out perfectly, and I was able to walk away with a digital watch, a denim shirt, a hoodie, and a quilted jacket, courtesy of Russia's civilian population. After grabbing some oven mitts to keep my hands warm, I triggered a house alarm. Fearing Putin's wrath, I broke into a nearby house and waited out the alarm. With the loot beginning to pile up, I found a mostly fenced-in house and decided to make it into a makeshift safe house, at least until I get my bearing a little more. I tried to catch an episode of Life and Living, only to realize the channel guide was also in Russian. Early that afternoon, I set out to explore some more, but after following a dirt road for a few hours, decided to head back to base for the rest of the day. The last thing I wanted to do right now was get caught out in a blizzard a few hours from home. After waking up on day 2, I grabbed some food and set out to continue down the dirt path leading to the north. It looks like this is another neighborhood, so I began looting some of the nearby houses or construction areas, coming away with carpentry books, screwdrivers, a hammer, and several boxes of nails. There's a ton of zombies here that I tried to bait out around the neighborhood, but it didn't work out how I was hoping it would. After killing a few zombies, the rest had wandered back over, resulting in a close call when I got way too cocky and rounded the corner without anticipating anything. In between days 2 and 3, I spent some time studying the map that Alt had sent me, and found out that I'm currently in... There's an AFB base to the east and another town to my south, so with that information, I set out to explore the southern town with plans to hit up the AFB base in the next few days. Well, that was the plan, anyway, until I reached the river crossing, only to find the bridge half destroyed. It's not the end of the world though. I don't have an axe, but I do have a hammer and some nails, and there's some planks nearby that I can use to build across. That being said, I'll need to hit carpentry level 1 to make flooring, so I spent the rest of day 3 reading carpentry volume 1. A lot of day 4 was spent searching houses for a saw, since I need one in order to begin disassembling things. While looting a house, I managed to find a duffel bag with some bullets in it. Not sure if I'll ever get to use them, but the bag is a huge addition. Immediately after finding the duffel bag, I headed out back to the shed where I found potato seeds and a garden saw, prompting me to spend the next few hours disassembling furniture. I hit level 1 by noon and began the trek back north to grab some planks out of the buildings under construction. I made it back to the bridge on the morning of day 5, and after spending an hour or so placing wooden floors, was able to finally make it across the river. While exploring a couple buildings to the west, I found some decrepit houses. One of my favorite things the mod authors did here was leave these openings on the second floors with loot on the other side. So you can build across to the loot if you want to risk it, or leave it if you can't be bothered. It's just a nice addition that I wish the base game did in its building design, aside from just copying and pasting the same 4 buildings over and over. While continuing to the south, I managed to stumble upon what I assume was a Russian soldier or guard. All that really matters was that I was able to take his shotgun off the corpse. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for at this point. There's still a ton of things that I need to do. Find or build a forever home, get a generator and a Jenny mag, find a working car, all of that is still on the to-do list. I might have found a potential forever base here, but I'll need to figure out how I can get rid of the claustrophobic proc, or at least find enough booze to counter it. The area is entirely walled in with tall fencing, so zombies can't get in as long as the doors are shut. The building itself is a boiler room, or at least that's what it looks like to me. I marked it on the map for now with plans to revisit it and continued south. I also thought I found a survivor home at one point and was super excited, but it turned out to just be a barricaded home. Turns out that massive building that I was interested in was actually just a half-finished structure. Oh well, on to the next one. That night I managed to find an antique oven while looting, but didn't take it with me since I couldn't carry it at the time. I'll have to come back here once I'm settled and scoop it back up. While looking at the map again, I noticed that there's a prison within walking distance, so I set out for it on day 6. I don't have a ton of weaponry, so if it's anything like the Rosewood prison, I'm not going to be able to do much at the moment, but I'm also determined to find a place to call my own. Worst case scenario, I just need a car and can live a nomadic lifestyle. While on my way over to the prison, I came across a large storage building that I thought was a gas station, and after taking care of the zombies inside, I found the main loot room, which held several melee weapons that I added to my arsenal. The buildings directly next to this warehouse are similar to those crop warehouses in Knox County where the crates are loaded with sacks of vegetables. The good thing about these warehouses though is that I can sleep in them without relying on vodka to ease my panic. I made it to the prison early that evening, trying to figure out a good way to get in without pulling every zombie in a 5-mile radius. It's heavily populated, but it's also well fortified, so if I can get in, I should have no troubles turning it into a borderline super base. That being said, there's a lot of work to be done, so I got to it. On day 7, I finally got my first heli event while walking back to the prison. Luckily, there's a massive open field on the way to the prison, so I was able to just continue walking without having to worry about any wandering hordes pulled by the heli. That being said, it certainly pulled zombies from the prison onto the road, leading to an unexpected engagement where I finally got to dual-wield melee weapons. By 4 o'clock that evening, I'd made it back to the gate, only to find it completely destroyed. This was a blessing and a curse, since this meant I could just waltz right in, but it also meant the zombies could just follow me home. By that evening, I'd managed to kill around 120 zombies in the area before deciding to head back to the warehouses for the night. By around midday, I'd made it back to the prison and began clearing out the zombies who'd wandered out after me. took a few hours, but I was able to push fully inside the walls by early afternoon. The buildings are absolutely loaded with zombies. Because I'm not using a zombie spawn fix mod to address this, it means I have to physically push into a lot of these buildings in order to clear the immediate area. While resting up, I made the mistake of not checking my surroundings, leading me to take a scratch on the left arm. This ultimately led to nothing, but did impact my ability to dual wield weapons for the next day or two. As it stands now, it takes around 2 hours to travel from the warehouses to the prison with the mix of jogging and walking. I'm definitely going to need to find a car, hopefully sooner than later. If I read the map right, there's a gas station to the north, so with any luck, I'll be able to find one there. My arm was still f***ed up, so after trying to fight for an hour or so, I eventually just gave up and began making my way back to the potential gas station so I could at least walk away with a small win today. Well, this is depressing. Day 10 was super combat heavy, so I'll show some of it, but I don't want to spend like 3 to 4 minutes just showing combat montages. This isn't liberating Louisville. I did almost end my run at around noon though when I broke down a door to find about a dozen zombies sitting there waiting for me. After finally getting into the building, I found all the boxes and lootable objects were just full of metal sheets. There's some cool posters on the wall and the layout of the buildings are really cool, but other than that, I haven't been able to find anything worth looting. Using some beta blockers I looted from a corpse, I spent the night in the second floor of a building before continuing to push out into the prison. Today was basically spent wrapping up the area. I'm starving, so the focus was food, but I ended up spending a ton of the day just stuck in one building trying to push back the hordes that continued to flood in. That afternoon, I found a small ammo stash in the prison loot room. No guns, but better than nothing. Fortunately, I found a cafeteria and was able to loot some canned foods and some butter to deal with the fact that I'm shedding weight every day. There's 2 other large prison sections, but the doors were locked, even after picking up a key, so I decided to pull the plug on the prison and dip out. There's some ammo there, but from what I can tell, there's nothing worth pursuing at this time. Maybe I'll come back and grab some firepower, but for now, I'm gonna change focus to the AFB base and to the city under it. I spent all of day 12 walking back to my original safe house. The map is way bigger than it actually looks, and even I fell for it, considering I spent almost 6 hours just jogging back to the neighborhood I spawned in at. On a positive note, I'm a lot closer to the AFB base, so I should be able to make it to the warehouses just outside of the city by tomorrow. Day 13 was all about getting to the city. This bridge wasn't blown out, so no building required, just running. Lots and lots of running. I felt like Forrest Gump when he just runs for like 2 months straight. Along the way, I stumbled across what I assume was a police checkpoint, but I forgot this is Russia, and for some reason that means police carry AK-74U submachine guns and carry a variety of ammo with them. Anyway, I managed to find 2 vehicles in a parking lot and spent the better half of the evening trying to pull zombies away from the cars to see if I could snag one of them. The keys for the 4-door were sitting on the ground, but the engine sucks on it, and I'm not sold it as any fuel. After spamming the engine and practically kissing death, I finally rolled it over and was able to head back to the safe house with a working car. Now that we have a working car, we can focus on finding things like a generator magazine and a generator. I figured the best place to look for a Jenny would be the AFB base, since most military checkpoints or bases tend to have loads of them, at least in vanilla and other modded maps like Raven Creek. While making my way back towards the nearby city, I Caitlyn Jennered an undead survivor, stopping to loot it for the prepper knife and ammo it had on him. I made it to the base by around 9 AM, but quickly realized that I can't access it without a sledgehammer. I'm not sure where any hardware stores are located, but the city seemed like a great place to look. While driving back into the city, I came across a self-storage, so I parked at a nearby gas station and got to work clearing the area. With the zombies taken care of, I began checking the self-storage units for a sledgehammer or any lootable gear. After looting several garages, I managed to find a wooden axe, a welder's mask, and a generator. All I need now is a Jenny mag, which I plan to find simply by going door to door in this city, which is named Completely unrelated, but I also found a garage that has a ton of rain collectors and a well in it. Do with that information what you will. I also found another generator, so as long as I find a Jenny mag, I can keep one at a gas station and another at the main base. Just an hour after finding the well, I was able to find a sledgehammer sitting in one of the crates. Instead of heading home that night, I drove back to the Jeep blockade and slept there. Of course, the first building I try to loot ends up tripping an alarm, pulling hundreds of zombies into the area. I was able to kite a chunk of them into an apartment complex before sneaking out through a bedroom window. After losing the zombies, I was able to successfully loot one section of an apartment complex for a ton of skill books and magazines before hitting up a garage and finding yet another sledgehammer. With a looting run in the books, I spent the rest of the day back at the safe house burning through all of my magazines. I'm planning on using the wooden axe I found to chop down a few trees and fully build out the bridge to the south. By 9 o'clock the next morning, I had gathered 40 planks to use. Because I stayed up all night to read skill books, I decided to read a few more hours before ending the day so I could get an early start tomorrow. By early afternoon, I'd completed the bridge. Now that I can travel back to the warehouses, I stopped by my original safe house to throw everything of value into the car before heading south. The only issue with this is that there's no clear path back to the warehouses, meaning I'll need to clear a path through the woods. With that in mind, I drove my car as far in as I can make it, grabbed as much gear as I could get my hands on, and finished the trek on foot. Most of day 18 was spent making the trek back to my car. I brought an axe back as well and proceeded to Paul Bunyan my way through the trees in order to make a clear, drivable path. After several hours of this, I finally managed to break through and make it back to the warehouses with my new vehicle. Since there's still a blizzard going on outside, I chose to spend day 19 cleaning up the warehouse and organizing my gear into containers depending on their respective categories. I finished up at around noon and spent the rest of the day grinding out various skill books. By day 20, the blizzard had let up some, allowing me to head back out and loot the nearby town. Admittedly, the car has seen better days. It still runs just fine, but with the driver window missing, the heater inside the car is essentially useless. But being around -20 Fahrenheit, I can't afford to continue fighting outside for longer than a few minutes before my swing speed is reduced. This makes fighting larger pockets like this one all the more dangerous, but mama ain't raised no bitch. I've been using the time spent looting houses as a way to escape the elements and rest, but I'd be lying if I didn't say most of today was spent fighting these pockets of 15 to 20 zombies, with minor sporadic looting sprinkled in here or there. That's not to say there weren't some close calls, though. After yesterday, I decided to just head back to the city near the self-storage units and start looting from there again. Also, I'm pretty sure I popped a tire since my car is just wobbling around right now, so there's that. Luckily, there's a small neighborhood just outside of the city, so I stopped there to warm up and do some looting. I managed to find another car here, but it's out of fuel and has a bad battery. If nothing else, I should be able to at least take a window out and put it in my car, or use this one to power level mechanics with. Inside another house, I found a second antique oven and a cot, which means I won't be getting tired at like 3 p.m. anymore. Another nagging issue is that I finally set up at those warehouses to the south, but it's still over a 2-hour drive to make it back there from the city. I think my best bet at this point is to leave small camps around the map and primarily travel as a nomad, but there's still some setup that I'll need to do before that. The looting run continued into day 22, where I managed to find a gas station with a bar behind it. This is huge because I can drink 1/4 of each alcoholic beverage and sleep in any building I want to, since it'll fully remove panic. It's a good way to get around the claustrophobic trait if you don't have beta blockers. Since I have booze now, I chose to sleep in one of the townhouses so that I didn't need to spend several hours driving all the way back out here tomorrow. Well, I'm fat as shit now and still rapidly gaining, so we'll need to address that at some point. But with that in mind, I continued to push into the city. It was around this time that I remembered I left a sledgehammer over here, which can be used to break down the walls at the AFB base. So that'll be the plan as soon as I can find a generator knowledge magazine. It turns out as long as I keep fighting, I won't get hypothermia. The only issue with this is that I have the physique of a gold standard Reddit mod, so I get tired quick. The entire premise of today was to clear out as many zombie groups as possible so that I could loot the surrounding structures without having to constantly watch my back. On the bright side, I managed to find a black cowboy hat, so that was a huge win for me. Normally, I'd skip this portion of the recording, but I wanted to take a moment and showcase some of the builds that the mod authors created. These are 3-story apartment complexes, complete with their own custom tiles. There's 2 apartments per floor, one on the south and north. I used these to hunt for the generator magazine, starting with the first one on the strip and working my way through each apartment. Luckily, or unluckily depending on the person, there's a couple windows per apartment that have these iron bars blocking them. These can't be broken, which causes the zombies to stack up on it. If you're not careful, you can aggro them like I do here. And after several days of searching, I finally found a generator magazine on Christmas Eve, in another set of apartments to the northeast of the originals. Since it's Christmas and I have a car full of loot, I decided to head home and spend a few days pounding through some skill books and getting my weight down. On the 27th, I caught hypothermia while in the middle of a snowstorm, and I'm assuming the power went out since the temperature dropped from 70 degrees all the way down to 19. I chose to build a fire pit inside since I was planning to head out in the morning anyway and didn't want to waste any fuel on a generator. On the morning of day 28, I grabbed a sledgehammer, some general supplies, and after taking stock on my ammo, decided to go the melee route, grabbing several short blunt weapons so I can dual wield before setting off for the AFB base. I reached the base that afternoon. Admittedly, this isn't the best time to come here. I don't know how packed the base is with zombies, and it's in the middle of a blizzard, with little daylight left. But okay, I'm already out here, I might as well go in. Inside the walls is what I can only describe as thousands and thousands of zombies. There's nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide. Every corner trips additional zombies to follow you. This led to another near-death experience when I tried to bait zombies into a building, only to run back out directly into a few hundred of them. Eventually, I found a large warehouse that I could pull them into before looping around and sledging a hole in the eastern wall, escaping back to a building in the city for the night. Since there's a massive horde to the east, I figured I'd take my chances and return to the AFB base again, but avoid that entire section. There's still hundreds of zombies idling around, so I got to work doing what I do best. Until I walked through a tree and cut my right hand on a ficus. With no way left to actively fight, I pulled the trick straight out of A Quiet Place and just started spam shouting like I was John Krasinski, pulling as many zombies as I could and slowly making my way back to the entrance. Once the zombies began flooding through, I took off back to the gas station to pass some time until I healed up. My arm is still injured, but my swing speed is back, so that's a good sign. Not wanting to pull the angry horde of Black Friday shoppers, I pushed far to the west and found a spot in between two groups of zombies, allowing me to get back into the base. You know, those dorks who tried to raid Area 51 could learn something from me. There's still a few pockets of zombies inside the walls, so I figured the best course of action would be to pull them one at a time and secure the area, and then just pray like hell the zombies that I'd pulled a few days ago didn't push back in. Luckily, I was able to take a page out of Germany's playbook, making the task of slaughtering Russian civilians look easy, allowing me to clear out the area by early afternoon. The building itself seems more like an office complex. Each room on the ground floor has several computers and bookshelves in it, along with a few zombies idling behind the doors. After several more hours of fighting, I was too tired to continue, so I decided to head back to the gas station for the night, continuing on the next day. Turns out it's hard to be stealthy when there's only one path and dozens of zombies waiting for you. I don't know if it's just because I've been addicted to killing everything in sight, or if it's just actually this tedious, but I've been finding myself simply brute forcing my way through almost every obstacle. Does anyone else feel the same way, or am I just a lunatic? There's also this slight hiccup with brutal hands where when there's one zombie on the ground and another in front of you, you'll sometimes proc the zombie on the floor, which can lead to this happening. Adding insult to injury, another heli event triggered, causing me to retreat back to the town in the south for the day. Just can't catch a break. How's that saying go? New year, same me? Yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, it's day 32, and after killing zombies for a few hours, sledging a hole in a wall, and looping around, I was finally able to break into the armory and loot some 9mm rounds and a Glock. There's still some gems in there like an assault rifle and a couple drum mags, but I'm tired and it's already almost 3 o'clock. I'm gonna need a shotgun if I want to grind out some aiming levels, so until then, a pistol isn't really gonna do me much good. By day 33, I was out of water and running low on supplies, so my goal was to get back into the AFB base, loot the armory I'd hit yesterday, grab my car, and head back to the warehouses to recover and restock. With the ammo canisters, I'd been able to loot about 40 boxes of 9mm ammo, so I grabbed 4 of those boxes, the Glock, and set off for the base, arriving that afternoon. Nothing's really changed since last time. If anything, it feels like there's more zombies. The strat is still the same though. Ball up a few hundred zombies, kite them to the far side of the building, loop around, and grab whatever I can get my hands on. The actual looting portion wasn't difficult. It was getting into the car and turning it on that proved to be near impossible. Luckily, thoughts and prayers worked for the first time in history, and I was able to escape back to the gas station where I picked up all my junk and fled back to the warehouses. This took way longer than it should have since the car kept stalling. It wasn't until several failed attempts that I realized there might be something wrong with the engine. After spending almost the entire night driving and stopping, then driving again, I ditched the car just past the bridge and walked back to base through the blizzard. During my slumber, I managed to become incredibly sick due to hypothermia and break my sickness, all within 12 hours. With only a few hours left in the day, I chopped down some trees to add around 100 hours of fuel to the campfire. I don't have any rain collectors and still need 2 levels in carpentry and several garbage bags to build them. I live pretty close to a river though, so I grabbed my empty tin cans and empty glass bottles and set off for the river. I didn't take the plastic water bottles since those don't boil in campfires, so it wouldn't make much sense. That evening of day 35 was spent pouring water from tin cans into water bottles before I finally upgraded my backpack. It's day 36 and I'm back to walking everywhere. I spent the morning heading into the nearby town and borrowing a TV from an abandoned house that I can only imagine the KGB hit first. I had plans to use the TV as a way to farm the VHS tapes, collecting dust in my base. It wasn't until I brought the TV back and turned it on that I realized it was an antique and didn't have a VHS slot in it. This day wasn't a complete failure though. Having to run back to the town allowed me to come across a rogue zombie carrying a machete. I didn't manage to find a TV that I could use, but I did find this weird truck. Is every vehicle in Russia this f***ing hard to start? No wonder everyone looks so pissed off and miserable all the time. I couldn't remember if I left a generator in the old car, but I needed fuel, so I set out to find the abandoned vehicle to scalp what I could and move on. That evening, I began training mechanics by tinkering with the vehicle wreckage just outside of my base. This came at a great time considering I walked outside to a blizzard on day 37. The mechanics grind went on for practically the entire day. I finally hit level 2 that afternoon, though it came at a price. A nasty cold sucks, but I have everything needed to deal with it. Booze and cereal. No, seriously, after lighting a campfire, I drank some wine, ate a ton of food, and then slammed some vodka before going to sleep. That Russian vodka worked overtime and I was cured by the next morning. I started off day 38 by disassembling all of my digital watches to give myself level 1 in electrical, because I completely forgot that I went with the burglar occupation and was convinced I still needed electrical 1 to hotwire cars. The afternoon was spent prepping to level my aiming skill. I'd managed to loot a double-barreled shotgun and around 25 boxes of 12-gauge shells from the looted canisters. Now, 750 shells should be more than enough to get me off the shotgun, but if I've learned anything in my years of Zomboid grinding, it's to always take more ammo than you think you'll need, and then take some more. By the time I was ready to party, it was 4 o'clock and I was already getting tired, so I decided to wait until tomorrow. When I was trying to think of a good place to go to train aiming, a couple places came to mind. I could go to a new city, back to the AFB base, but one stood out. After packing up the truck the following morning, I set off back for the penitentiary. The big reason for this is there's 2 prison rooms with armories supposedly hidden somewhere in there. With that, let's get to work. By early afternoon, I was becoming hypothermic, so I decided to dip into a nearby building, slowly baiting the zombies up the stairs before jumping out a window and repeating the process. It's worth noting that I'd begun looting the corpses since some of them carry AK-74s, only further proving that the Russians want to be American public school kids so bad. It turns out those 2 buildings in the back are just prison barracks and don't have any armories in them. To make this feel slightly less like a waste of time, I looted both of the guard towers in the north and called it at that. After dropping almost 200 shells, I'd managed to level up aiming 4 times and reloading twice. Now that I've got some levels in aiming, I figured it'd be a good time to revisit the AFB base and see what I could uncover. I have around 30 boxes of 5.56 ammo, along with 2 drum mags and a Colt M723 rifle, so I stocked up and began the long drive back. I made it to the gas station that afternoon, and after clearing out the area, settled in the back room for the night. The next morning saw me heading back into the AFB base for like the 20th time. This time was different though, and by that I mean I got to pull off the no Russian that all the MW3 fans thought they were getting. That evening, I was exhausted, out of bullets, and staring down about a dozen zombies. Luckily, we're right next to a f***ing armory. I spent all of day 42 recovering from yesterday. By the time I'd woken up, it was already late into the afternoon, so I decided to Blair Witch myself into a corner and watch paint dry after taking inventory on the gear I'd collected. Another heli event triggered at around 5 o'clock, but the zombies didn't know where I was, so it wasn't really a threat. On day 43, I set back out to find my van that I'd left behind, since there's no way in hell I'm just gonna walk all the way back to my safe house, especially in the snow. There's still some more of the base to explore, but I've spent enough time here, and I really just want to check out some other cities around the map. After wandering around the woods for an hour or so, I found the van and was able to get it started, even after having the lights on for almost 3 days. The rest of the day was spent reading some more skill books since it was too late in the day to start anything worth doing. That was, until zombies broke part of the gated door, forcing me to move the van in its place. Day 44 was a complete waste of a day. I'd completely forgotten that I stashed all those boxes of 9mm ammo at the gas station by the AFB base, so I spent all day driving back out there, collecting my loot, and then driving home. I don't know if it was because the zombies were slowly beginning to dismantle my warehouse, or if I was just going through withdrawals, but I had this overwhelming urge to build out a base. So starting on day 44, I drove my van out into the woods and began committing mass deforestation. While playing Lumberjack Sim, I was ripping clothing to make sheet rope. With the tailoring mod, you need 16 ripped clothing to make 1 sheet rope, which means I gotta start shredding. Luckily, there's more than a few corpses lying around for me to borrow from. This continued until around 2 o'clock on day 46, before the wood axe broke for the second time. At this point, I figured I had more than enough logs to get the job done, and began stacking logs into the van using the sheet rope I'd been collecting. Even with the van and the 8 sheet rope, this took several days to move all the logs, but by day 49, I was able to start sawing away at them. I want to save some logs to make log walls with, but I'll need some planks to build out some more defenses. On day 50, I sledged out all the glass and windows in the main warehouse, before replacing them with tiles from the More Builds mod. After hitting Carpentry level 4, I spent day 51 reading Volume 3 skill book before continuing my base redesign. On the 21st, I fully built out a bedroom for myself before spending the rest of the day grinding through my stick collection, using them to craft around 50 spears. I need to get door hinges and doorknobs, so that was my goal for day 53. After collecting about 5 doorknobs and 15 door hinges, I made it back to base and spent the next several hours building and disassembling various doors, trying to find one that matched up with the walls. After settling on a dark wooden door, I grabbed my tin cans and set out for the river to refill my water supply. Everything was going so smoothly. I'm not entirely sure how this happened. I hadn't had any issues with the campfire in the past, so here's my best guess. The generator outside must have dropped below 20% condition without me noticing, resulting in an explosion which lit the entire room on fire. I tried to put it out using some of the water on me along with the tin cans I could grab out of the campfire, but it was futile. I'd already lost both generators, and the entire warehouse was up in flames, with the fire spreading to the nearby buildings. I grabbed some of the supplies, such as food and water, along with my shotgun and some ammo, before fleeing the area into the unknown, using some abandoned houses as shelter to prevent hypothermia from setting in. Oh, and if you're wondering where my van was, by 3 o'clock I'd managed to reach my original safe house. Unfortunately, a heli event triggered as I walked in the door, pulling all the nearby zombies to my location and forcing me to hide in the kitchen. With my right arm burned, I can't fight with melee weapons, leaving firearms as my only other option. Now, being a red-blooded patriot American, there's nothing I'd love more than to put a good shotgun to use. But if I do that, I'd risk pulling every zombie in the area to my front door. What I needed to do was get my bearings and then push out. I'm right back to square one at the moment. No car, no generator, and barely any food. At this point, I figured my best bet was to head back into the city. I have a ton of ammo and some food, so if I need to, I can simply brute force my way into some safety while still keeping an old safe house back here for the worst case scenario. I also remembered there was a second car back at that parking lot where I found the first one some weeks back. After making my way to the lot, I pulled out my shotgun and got to work, though my goal isn't necessarily to kill everything here. The shotgun I'm using just isn't powerful enough to do any real damage. What I really wanted to do was pool the zombies together and then lose them in the greenhouses before looping back to check out the car. It's not in horrible condition, it really just needs some fuel, so I'll need to either find another car or walk all the way back to the safe house, grab the gas can, and come back. I chose to head back home and grab the gas can, but that meant almost an entire day of travel again, so I chose a good halfway point and stopped there for the night before continuing on the following morning. I made it to the OG safe house on the morning of day 56, grabbed the gas can, rested up, and swapped out the shotgun for a Glock before setting back out for the vehicle. I will say, it's times like this where I really appreciated that I went with 9 fitness, since I relied on jogging to keep me warm while in the blizzards with temperatures dropping well into the negative 20s. I reached the car that afternoon and after getting it started, drove it back to the small group of houses to the west where I spent the rest of the day hiding out. The goal for today is to find a generator and some more fuel. I can use the gas station in the city to fully restock, but obviously I'll need a generator and gas to power that generator before we can even think about getting back up and running. Luckily for me, I managed to find another generator pretty early on while exploring the same self-storage units from earlier in the video. With that, I was able to fully refuel the car, fill up the spare gas can, and secure the gas station. Later on, I found another generator in a shed of one of the houses, so I brought that back to the gas station as well. While checking out the town, I found this fenced-in mansion that I think I want to take over, or at least explore. The only problem with that is that the entire block looks like Skid Row. On the morning of day 58, my arm was finally healed up and I could fight again. I also came to a realization here though, and decided to pass on the mansion and turn my sights to an entirely new city. Just north of me is a massive city named So I grabbed a Jenny, threw it in the back seat, and started driving. I rolled into the southern neighborhoods of just before noon and started checking out some of the buildings in the area. One thing with this city that I really love, at least in the south here, is these massive apartments. And it's not just because they look so beautiful, but I also found a modern TV with a VHS player inside. That afternoon, I found an apartment and tried to pull the zombies out so that I could rest up here, but I ended up just spamming hundreds of bullets into a horde before calling it quits and walking away empty-handed. The next morning, I continued my push into the city. Not really sure what I'm looking for right now, but I'm trying to take a more nomadic approach, especially considering what just happened at my last base. In retrospect, I basically just spent 2 hours driving around and admiring the city. It's hard to tell with all the snow on the ground, but the map is gorgeous, especially when you consider that it was all handcrafted by players. That was really all today was, just admiring the views. There's too many zombies in the cities right now for me to do much looting, so I'm planning to just stick to the outskirts and observe the area. Maybe lob a few Molotovs, who knows. But for now, I want to focus on finding a better vehicle with a little more storage so that I can make this nomad lifestyle a little more enjoyable. The best thing for me right now is something with a lot of storage space, since I'm planning to essentially live out of my car like a bum, or one of those weirdos who are totally mentally stable and turn a van into a tiny home because they think that'll make them interesting to talk to. There's still some fairly large cities to the north, south, and west of us, but one place in particular that I want to check out is the military quarantine camp, all the way in the southeast. I'm not sure how long it'll take to get there, considering it takes almost a full day to just drive from this city to the northern one, but that's my goal. So with that, I spent all of day 60 looting some of the houses in the area around the gas station. I really just needed food, an extra water bottle or two, and maybe an extra gas can, so that's what I targeted. With a few weeks worth of supplies, a Jenny, and a new car, I set off for the military containment camp, after Caitlin Jennering a small crowd of pedestrians. By the end of the first day, I'd practically zeroed my engine after ramming into a few cars that looked like they were just randomly spawned into the map. On the bright side, I managed to find a jack and a lug wrench in the trunk of some of the cars, and in conjunction with a wrench I brought as a melee weapon, I decided to set up camp here for a few days to farm mechanics until I could take engine parts. The grind started on day 62, and to say this was a grind, well, that'd be an understatement of the video. This was basically just a week of me farming the same few cars over and over again, burning through my resources just for the sake of farming some engine parts for the Jeep. Looking back, I definitely should have just taken one of these cars and kept it moving instead of dropping everything to farm mechanics without skill books. Honestly, I probably would have even made it to the camp on foot in the time it took to gain these levels. By day 70, I still needed around 500 XP to hit level 5. It was only after all these days of grinding that I noticed I only needed mechanics level 2 to take engine parts. I'm not totally insane though, since some cars still needed mechanics level 5. I think there's some cars that are still specific for the Project Russia mod pack that only require level 2, but any cars from Filibuster Rhymes used cars still require level 5 mechanics. After grabbing all the engine parts and replacing all the shitty parts in the Jeep, I was ready to get back on the road. There was just one problem. It's been about 10 days, and I'm completely out of Monster energy drinks. Luckily, there's a very small town right next to me, so I made a pit stop there for the day and began looting the place. I was so desperate that I even broke into an outhouse, fully prepared to chug shit water, only to find that it wasn't possible. After raiding the cupboards, I managed to find a single off-brand, non-suable soda brand pop, but finally caved and chugged water out of the nearby pond. If you don't know, you can drink pond water with a weak stomach and it won't kill you as long as you don't spam it. While continuing my journey on day 73, I drove past a gas station and stopped to loot the place, walking away with several more water bottles and cans of soda. I made it to the military camp that morning and got to work giving the locals the good old Stalin welcome. The place is completely overrun. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but for some reason, thousands of zombies wasn't it. After kiting for a few hours, I managed to sneak into one of the buildings with an armory on the second floor. There's several rifles here, but only one box of 5.56 ammo, so I opted for the shotgun instead, coming away with over 15 boxes of ammo ready for use. At this point though, I was trapped inside the building with hundreds of zombies having flooded in behind me, just not knowing which room I was in. I have an extra water bottle and tons of food in my inventory though, so I'm not in any rush to leave. And with that in mind, I sat down and started reading some skill books that I had in my backpack. The next morning, I unbarricaded the planks on the window and took a literal leap of faith. Equipped with a shotgun and around 600 shells, I began the quest of cleansing the area. This worked for about 30 seconds until I got into an abandoned warehouse and tripped over a zombie, dropping my shotgun and scraping my shin. After having a Peter Griffin moment, I got up and threw myself through a window, scratching my arm but escaping with my life. As if that wasn't enough, I also Paul Walkered my car while trying to leave the camp, near totaling it. After backtracking for a few hours, I made it back to the gas station and chose to spend the rest of the day there, hoping to heal up before continuing my journey. There's a city just to the west of me named Zomboid that I figured was worth checking out since I was in the area. I just wasn't willing to run in there with half a leg and a busted arm. By day 75, my leg was healed up, but my arm was still scratched. Since I was close to leveling up sprinting anyway, I decided to play it safe and spend another day healing up, grinding out sprinting in the meantime. When I wasn't sprinting, I was reenacting scenes from my 600-pound life, shotgunning Kit Kats and slamming sodas, before fully healing my arm that evening. The big downside with running Cryogenic Winter is that, well, it's cold. All the time. So when you, burn down your safe house and have to live on the streets with no source of heat, well, you get sick. It turns out that even the car heater can't save me from that. So at 3 a.m., cold, sick, and dying of hypothermia, I set off for the nearest city, hoping to find an antique oven or warmer clothing in a house before I died. I continued this for about an hour until I remembered that I had an antique oven back at the gas station. At this point, it became a race against time to make it back before I lost the remaining third of my health. Unfortunately, it was on this fateful day that I was bested by a literal skill issue. See, hypothermia in and of itself won't kill you in Project Zomboid. It'll just drop you to 1 HP, where something like sneezing too hard will put you 6 feet under. In all honesty, I panicked hard here, and only after making it all the way back to the gas station, holding my antique oven, did I love tap a gas pump, ending my run, and completing a meme over 2 years in the making, finally becoming one with Paul Walker. Project Russia is a fantastic map overhaul and one that I highly recommend trying out, though maybe without the Cryogenic Winter mod on top. Even though my run was cut short, I still had a blast playing through it, and even after almost 3 months in game, there was still several large cities left unexplored that I'm eager to check out in a future run. As always, thank you to all my YouTube members and Patreon supporters who help make it possible for me to continue to make videos like this. And thanks to you, if you made it through this video and all of my insufferable ramblings. I appreciate you all. Be safe, and thanks for stopping by.